You know what, I can do a full track breakdown on this, and then I'm going to do something that's a bit more niche to the bass line. So I've had a lot of people asking about how I ended up finalizing that kind of bass design. So let's start from the fucking top, eh? Well, when it comes to remixing, there's two things that I start with. I go online and I look for the MIDI pack. That MIDI pack will give you all the MIDI regions for all of the melodic elements within that track, and that gives you a good basis to start off when you're working with remixes. Then I do my best to find a studio a cappella, the best quality a cappella you could possibly find, or even a re-sing that sounds similar. That is perfectly fine as well. All you want to do is make sure that you're using high quality stuff when you're going for this, because when it comes to the final result, you don't want some fucking 64-bit sounding vocal line on there. So let's start from the top. We got our kick drum. Kick drum, pretty straightforward. Down the bottom you can see here, got a little bit of an EQ, giving a bit more punch in the low mids here at about 200 hertz. Then we have our shelf in the low end just to bring up those low frequencies. Then I have run it through Transgressor, which is an awesome plugin. It's a transient shaper. So what I've done here is just I've boosted the sustain in the low end, meaning that the sub frequencies are going to stick around longer, and then I've reduced a little bit of the sustain in the low mids here. So this is helping the sub and the low end of the kick really punch through without the muddy area of the kick taking over and sticking around for too long, you know? It's like that one dude at kick-ons that overstays his welcome. Nah, we'll just pull him back a little bit. I got a snare roll. Pretty simple. I like to do a lot of my drums in MIDI for a few reasons. So on this, processing wise, haven't done much. We've got the snare 200 hertz pop. So around 200 hertz, you give it a little boost and helps the low end pop through in your mix, and then a low pass filter. I usually like to use a velocity automation on this. So rather than, you know, automating up your gain or just using filters like so commonly used, Ableton has a velocity MIDI plugin, which then you can automate how hard each hit is being hit. And I think I've probably utilized a bit of groove. No swing in this one. No manual swing either. Pretty straightforward. Clap. Bit of reverb automation there on the build up. How have I processed this? So I've actually got 2 layers of claps here. Simple with EQs. And then on the bus, glue compression. Glue them together. Sound delay. This is a really cool tool and it's free from Voxengo. So what you can do is set it to dual mono mode. Basically that puts the signal into 2 separate signals coming through each side, and then you can add a sample delay. So right now, one side of this is playing 10 milliseconds behind the other one, giving it the illusion of width. So I like to do this on a lot of my claps. As I said, I learned this from another engineer, and it kind of just gives a bit of space in the mix for your for your claps. And then onto the hats. Hats and percussion. Pretty straightforward, this stuff. Usually I go a bit deeper with layers, but I've just got 2 different layers of top loops and 2 little hi-hats, crash, and some rides here. Something that I commonly do when I'm using loops so it sounds a bit more unique to the loops that you're using, and so you can adjust it to your tracks as well, is down here in this corner you actually have a transient mode. So if you go to beats, transients, and then set it to this little right looking arrow, this number here will reduce the amount of sustain that is in the loop. So if I bring it all the way back up and I solo this, everything's a bit open, right? And then if I bring it back down to 73 where it's at, it'll just tighten up all these hits a bit. So it makes it tighter. It's really cool for tech house and house genres. And it's also such a great way to add authenticity to your tracks. So I'm pretty sure I would have done that for any of these loops that I've used. Also with a lot of these loops, sometimes I'll go through and cut out hits that don't need to be there and reconsolidate them into a loop, save those loops, and then use them in future tracks or as layers behind the main drums in future tracks as well. Other than that, again, it's pretty simple. I've got a tom fill here. Tom fill, cool, combined with a crash and stuff. And then the bass line. So I went pretty in depth with designing this bass line. What I've done here is we have 2 instrument racks within an instrument rack. What? How does that make sense? So I'll show you. We've got the lows here, and within the lows group, we have 2 different low frequency presets. And in the high mids, we also have 2 separate layers all combining together to make this one sound. So let's start with the low end. So we've got 2 layers. We've got the sub layer, which I've just used some EQ and LFO tool, which is great for these 1/16th rhythm or arpeggiated bass lines. I noticed that it was sticking around too much around the rest of the mix, and whilst the high mids and the top basses were sounding nice and punchy, the sustain in the sub was sticking around too long. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to use an LFO tool specifically on the subs so that it doesn't stick around too long, creating a bit of groove in the track, creating energy in the track, and also reducing a little bit of muddiness when it was kind of clashing with the kick. And from there, I've got a knock bass. You might not even hear it right now, but it's just a little bit of low mids just punching through, and that little layer just helps it kick a little bit harder. And then on both of those, I have some processing. So I just have my fave decapitator, which looks like it's not hitting that right now. Now it is. Once I bring in the sub, got a little bit of harmonic distortion on there, baby. To change the timbre of a sound, I'll gravitate to decapitator, harmonic distortion, or over to Saturn or another saturation plugin to add some harmonic saturation, which sounds delicious if you use it right. It's just adding that little bit of sauce on top of it, which you can see down here. I have a sauce. It's my sauce plug, black box, probably my favorite saturation unit. Now onto the top basses. So within the top bass, we have one. So when I was using this preset, so every time I load up a preset as well, I adjust the ADSR, which is the attack, decay, sustain, and release, which is pretty much how a sound moves. I'm not going to explain ADSR to you today, but definitely look it up if you have a good understanding of this. It'll not only help you with sound design, it'll help you with using processing units and understanding why you're setting it to these settings to get the desired outcome that you're looking for or that you hear in your mind. I say this to people all the time, but I think thought process is probably one of the biggest things that can go into somebody leveling up with their music production. Learning techniques is sweet, but learning why and when to apply these is fucking magnificent. I always say it's learning technical things and then applying them in a subjective or contextual way. Every track has its own identity. And I remember working on this and just thinking, hey, maybe it's not wide enough. It's not wide enough. It kind of has the right tonality, that energy, that kind of grit to it, but it didn't have the width and it felt a bit thin on the bass line. So that's when I added this guy. It's kind of like a wide saw. You hear it commonly in tech house, but I think the way that I've used it in this isn't so common. I've got a lot of parameters being automated, things going in and out, cutoff going up and down, and obviously with it at that arpeggiated line. So I think all these elements come together is what really makes this bass line. You know, we've got simple EQ, again, we've got the decapitator, bit of harmonic distortion on it, and to create a little bit of width, I've used Ozone's Imager, specifically selecting different bandwidths within the audio spectrum and boosting them in terms of width across the stereo spectrum accordingly. Cool, so let's put all of the bass line together now. So we've got all of those elements working together. It's beautiful. It's fucking beautiful, mate. And we've got a low pass filter, again, come in and out, bring in and out the high frequencies. A high pass filter, cutting the low end in the breakdowns or in at the end of a phrase or whenever you kind of want to signify that a change is happening. And then the overall processing of this. So I've used FabFilter Pro MB, which is a multi-band compression unit. I've specifically selected these different bandwidths and used upwards compression, a dynamic upward compression to give a bit of, not groove, but allow these kind of different frequency spectrums to pop through in the mix. And you can see here how all the lines are kind of bouncing up and down. This is why I've used dynamic upward compression. So this, how they're going up and down, these boosts aren't affecting the signal the entirety of the time. What they're doing is pretty much doing the opposite of a sidechain. We're boosting these at specific times when we want it to pop. So I wanted more low end pop or more low mids pop. That's what this one's for. I guess this falls into low mids as well, and this is probably in the mid high mid frequency range. These are all popping up and down so that, as I said, it's popping up when it needs to be and it's not affecting the entirety of the sound throughout the whole track. Interesting one, really cool unit. And then we got a sidechain, very simple, kickstart, and then Pro Q. So again, this one's just chopping. I think there was some resonant frequencies in this high range here, so I've just used that to cut it out. I boost a little bit of the high mids here and the high frequencies too, and then I've just dropped down around 300 hertz, which is usually where you'll find a lot of your muddy stuff. Remember, when you are processing your low end with these EQs, to chuck it into linear phase mode. This will stop your bass from going out of phase, which can cause phase cancellation and ultimately change the timbre of the sound and how hard it hits. So linear phase, remember that shit, it'll help you out tenfold. From there, we've got the group processing. So I've got I've got the 4 layers on my main bass, and then I've got a reese and a breakdown. So I'm processing these both together. I just start with a standard glue compressor. Ableton stock glue compressor is quite good. Make sure when you're using these kind of processing units that you're analyzing how much gain reduction is and using your makeup gain to equal the gain reduction. I say this because if you're using compression and that compression's making it softer or louder, how can you actually tell what the compression is doing to that sound? So the idea is that when you A/B it, so on/off it, that it is at the exact same volume level when it's on to when it's off. That way, when you A/B, you can you can hear what the difference is and what that processing unit is actually doing to the sound, rather than getting a false judgment, but the extra loudness that it's added or taken away from the sound. That is something that's helped me level up big time. Then I've got another saturation unit, thermal, fantastic. I usually use it on drums, but this time I've decided to use it on the bass line. Got another EQ here, so this one's interesting. I doubled down on the cutting of the muddiness around that 300 hertz zone. I also realized there wasn't enough sub-frequency in it, so I've just got a slight shelf boost on the low end here. And this is also another technique that I like to use across different elements. You can use it on your top basses, on your drums, on your vocal, is that give a dynamic boost to your top end, but set it to only affect the sides of your mix or your element. So this will give a little bit of like an impression of width without actually pushing stuff out to the sides too much. Basically what it's doing, it's dynamically boosting the high frequencies, but only in the stereo spectrum on the left and right, not in the middle. Because I have so many things sitting in that part of the frequency spectrum in the middle, I've decided to, hey, maybe I'll push it to the sides a bit to allow each element breathe and have its own space. And then from there, straight onto a bit of limiting. So I usually take true peak limiting off because that will destroy too much of your transients. So this one's, it's kind of mild, given that this bass line has so many automations in it and changes in volume. This will be way more intense at some points than other points, but basically we're just trying to flatten out the whole signal so it has an equal loudness the whole way through, or most of the way through. And yeah, that's the bass line. Let's hear it with the track. I know, technical, right? If you've got any questions about it, feel free to drop a comment or shoot us a DM. I'm happy to help out. Or if you need mixing and mastering done, feel free to reach out to your boy. Let's go. Dope. All right, onto our synths, our pads, our fun stuff. All the melodies. So, what do we got? Let's start with these strings. We got an ARP. Not too much processing done on this one. I think I just did a little bit of sound design on the original patch. And we have these chord stabs, which I've just used in the breakdown. Help build some tension leading up to the drop. Then we have our strings. It's great, adds a bit of tension. And then we have a specific tension string, which is just one single high-pitched string. You can add this in your breakdowns, in your intros, or inside even over the drop to add a bit of tension and energy to your tracks. In terms of processing for these, I've done absolutely nothing on the bus. I think they all sat pretty well. Mind you, I bounced it to stems and then did the mix and master on a separate session. So I would have done stuff on that down the line. Vocals. So believe it or not, this is actually a Remixing. This is not the original vocal. This is not Florence. I reckon it probably doesn't hit as well as the original vocal, but nonetheless, this is what I decided to use for this thing, for this project. You can hear there, I've got a little bit of automation going on with the auto pan function. This is just adding that stutter effect in there. And I thought, you know what, let's double down on this stutter effect. So I've actually added layers in the background with the stutter effects going on. With these ones, I've pushed them left and right, and I've added auto pan, so it's moving left and right in the stereo spectrum. This is all to give every element its own space as well. I've even used, a bit of distortion on this one as well as LFO tool and what I assume is a repitching. So you can see down here as well, I've pitched down this layer about an octave. I don't think I actually end up using that in the final track. And then here, vocal reverbs. I love this. Been using Technique in my tracks for years. So basically what I'll do is I'll take the first syllable of the line that you want the vocal verbs to kind of build up to. I'll take that, I'll chuck it into a separate channel, I'll drop one of my reverbs here, my longest reverb onto a send, I'll reverse it, and then I'll flatten it to audio and reverse that again to use it as a kind of a tonal sweep to lead into the vox. People say, hey, why do you reverse it after you've chopped out the first syllable? Because you want that verb tonal reverse to have the same tonality as the first syllable. So if you do it without reversing it, then you're actually going to be getting it from the end of the first syllable, not from the beginning of that first syllable. So chop it out, reverse it, add on your reverb, flatten it, and then chop out the part that leads up to that first transient on the vocal chop. Sick technique. And as I said, if you guys got any fucking questions, feel free to reach out. And then our effects. I didn't go as all out on effects as I usually do on this one. We've got risers, sweeps, downlifters. That's about it. Some impacts and whatnot. All right, and then when you chuck it all together, let's play the full track. Listen, guys, you got any comments, feel free to drop it down in the comments section. Any questions, shoot me a DM at all. But thanks for your support. Thanks for the love on this record. Looking forward to releasing more tunes soon. And swing us a follow if you want to see any more shows, any more content, any more production tips or DJ tips. Peace, yo.